able to see her? All right. There you go. Lots of people. Hello, everybody. Welcome in. We are just getting settled and getting comfortable, and we'll make our introductions in just a few minutes' time. You're in the right place if you've come to work on some listening skills for CELPIP. And I think we're going to have a nice big audience today. Yeah.
Hello, everyone.
And that number keeps climbing.
61, 62. More and more people are joining, right?
Yes. I'm hoping we'll get over the 100 mark. We'll just take it a moment. I appreciate that Satya Morthy has already said hello in the chat box. I think it's wonderful as we're waiting to get started to start it off on a positive note. So thank you for doing that. And Alan is saying good evening. So I'm assuming we've got some time zone differences here. It is 2 o'clock in Vancouver, where Sarush and I both live, but it might be a lot later for some of you, depending where you're listening from. If you're just joining in now, feel free to type into the chat box and let us know where you're listening from. That's always kind of a fun way to go as well. Alberta, so you're only 3 o'clock, not too much of a difference. All right. Toronto, we've got Ontario, and that's my home province. Okay. So you're making me nostalgic.
Anyone from Vancouver?
Woo!
Saskatchewan, right? Vancouver, right?
Ottawa. Do we have anyone international yet? Meaning, oh, here's New Brunswick. So the Maritimes are here now. Nova Scotia. Yes, so we have Atlantic Canada. We have Pacific Canada. We've got the prairies. Nigeria. We have some international people now. It's a game I play.
Nova Scotia. Oh, that's great.
Yeah, exactly. I can't imagine what time it would be in Nigeria, though. It would be at least 9 hours ahead, maybe?
They are exactly. I think they are 9 hours ahead of us.
So it's about 11 p.m. or something like that there.
That's I suppose so. Yeah.
It's quite late. Oh, it's 10 p.m. We were so close.
Oh, 10 p.m. Yeah, like 8 hours, right?
I knew it was close. I fly to Europe.
We have somebody from India here.
There you go. Philippines as well. Morocco.
Oh, wow.
Morocco. I almost went there on vacation in May, but I chose to go to Greece instead. So Morocco is still on my list, and I will get there someday, I'm sure. Nice. Well, if you are just joining me, please allow me to introduce myself quickly. My name is Brandy. I'm going to be your presenter today for the listening session for CELPIP. But before I launch into our session we prepared, I wanted to pass you over to Sarush here, who's going to introduce himself and tell you a little bit about his school and his prep programs. So Sarush, the floor is yours.
Of course, thank you. So hello, everyone, and welcome to today's joint webinar between Prometric and ILIA English Academy. I'm Sarush Azani, and I have the privilege of serving as the founder and owner of ILIA English Academy. On behalf of our entire team, I would like to extend a warm thank you for joining us today and being part of this engaging learning experience. If you would like to know about ILIA English Academy, we are a Vancouver-based online language school for IELTS, CELPIP, ESL, French, and Spanish with 28 years of professional background. And we currently deliver courses to students from all around the world. Our teachers are located in Vancouver, Toronto, Montreal, Calgary, and Costa Rica, because our Spanish teacher is Costa Rican and she gets connected from there. We are also proud to be CELPIP Network official member and approved center in Canada, offering both training services, training classes, and mock tests to aspirant students and applicants. About the courses that we offer at ILIA English Academy, we do general English classes for basic, elementary, and pre-intermediate students. We do power English classes for intermediate, upper intermediate, and advanced students. IELTS preparation, bi-weekly IELTS mock tests, CELPIP preparation, CELPIP mock test, CAL preparation, CAEL, job interview preparation, free discussion classes. We do essay writing, we do French classes. We also have Spanish classes, as I told you about a few minutes ago. So if I'm going to share some of our social media links here with you in the chat box. So you can follow us there. So here. this is our Instagram. And let me also see. Okay. So we also have like a page on Telegram if you have an account on Telegram. So our Telegram, this is on CELPIP, and the name is CELPIP Up. So we share pretty much good, materials there with the students over there. And also, so give me a second. I think you cannot click on the one here. So it's okay. I think you should be able to check this. No, this is good. And also, so if you would like to visit our website, this is our website address, iliaenglish.ca. And if you also want to Google us, this is the link to our Google. Oh, no links can be seen, right? Why is that so, Randy?
Actually, I can see the links and click on them just fine from my end. So I'm wondering if there are maybe just a few people who have a different system or something.
That was for the panelists. Sorry. Oh no. Oh my God. Oh, again. Now, I'm going to share again. Sorry, everyone. So I'm going to share them again. I'm sorry.
Well, yeah, it's okay. While Saruj is typing, I'll explain what's happened because this is helpful for all of you listening right now.
Right.
When you type questions into the chat box, you can address them to everyone so the public can see. Or if you just address them to the hosts and panelists, the only ones who can read those comments would be Saruj and myself and any staff members, right?
I was sharing everything with Brandy. Sorry.
So that's why I said, well, I can see it just fine.
Sorry, my bad. So that was our, so this is, I think everybody can see our Instagram link. So here is our Telegram. The name is CELPIP Up. It's all about CELPIP tests. And I'm going to be sharing our website address. So thanks for letting me know, everyone. It's just like, okay, so this is our website. You can visit these links and you can follow us on Instagram, on Telegram. And also, if you would like to Google us, here is the link to our Google. I think it's enough for now. You can find lots of different information about our school there. Okay. Throughout today's webinar and the 3 sessions to come, we will delve into various aspects of the CELPIP exam. And we're going to be offering insights and strategies and tips to help you succeed. We strongly believe that a solid understanding of the test structure, content, and scoring criteria can make a significant difference in your performance. And we are really thrilled to be your guides on this journey in these 4 sessions. Good news for webinar attendees today. Each one of you will receive free study materials from Prometric. And another good news is that each one of you will receive 1 free CELPIP class from ILIA English Academy. 1 free CELPIP class from ILIA English Academy. So you can contact us, and you'll be also contacted. So you can contact us for that free session. And so I think that's really good news, isn't it? So I'm done. Brandy, the stage is all yours. Yeah. So please, we're all ears. Let's get started.
All right. Thanks so much. That's wonderful that everybody does get an opportunity to study or try out ILIA. So thank you for offering that, Saruj, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's nice. I mean, Sarush and I are both here to, as he says, guide you on your journey to prepare for CELPIP as you get ready for whatever immigration pathways that you set out on. So we're very happy to offer this kind of support to you. So very quickly, just as we understand sort of what's in store here, you'll notice by now that your microphones are muted. And we are going to continue to use the chat box just as like you have been doing. So during this presentation, as I lead you through some practice listening questions, I'm going to be asking all of you very many questions all about the CELPIP listening. We're going to answer some questions together. So feel free to use the chat box to type in your answers. You can ask questions as well of me or of Sarush, anything about the CELPIP test or about ILIA Academy. Feel free to ask in the chat box as we're presenting. I always keep an eye on that chat box and Sarush can read it too. So one of us, if I'm presenting, I'll answer if I'm able to, or perhaps Sarush will type with you in the chat box and so on. I do have a colleague online right now too named Allison. She goes by the name of CELPIP and Kale. So you might see that in the chat box too. And she's just said a hello there. So she's going to be with us for part of the session today as well to offer support through typing in the chat box just in case we need it. But I feel like between the three of us, between Sarush, Allison, and myself, I think you're in good hands. We'll answer your questions as we can. All right, so we've fixed all the tech issues. Everyone can hear us, so let's keep going. You can take screenshots of anything you see that you think is particularly useful today, as I'm showing you some of the visuals. You're welcome to take notes. And here's what I'd suggest. Because this is a listening exercise today, to be very successful on your CELPIP listening test, you're going to need to practice and understand how to take short but effective notes as you're listening to the audio. And we're going to practice that skill together as a group. So I'd love it if you've got paper and pen somewhere handy at home, wherever you're listening, and we're going to practice our note taking together today. So we'll see how that goes as a group. And sometime in the next, we say 24 hours or so, we are going to email you with some helpful study materials. So just as Sarush has kindly offered up one free class at ILIA Academy, so too, the company that administers CELPIP, we're called Prometric, we would like to give you a promotional code as well to redeem a free study material that's going to help you with your speaking and your listening. So we will email you the promotional code to redeem that if you would like. You're also going to receive from us a link to access some study notes that will summarize the listening strategies that we're talking about today. So I think that will be very helpful too. And we're not recording this exact webinar that we're conducting now to send to you, but what we will do is give you a link to access a pre-recorded version of the Listening Pro webinar. So all the webinars that we deliver, and that's my job in the company, one that I enjoy very much. I'm an online instructor with Prometric. So I deliver a lot of these webinars either here through Zoom, sometimes on our YouTube channel or on Instagram and what have you. So we keep one master copy of every single webinar that we deliver free, like the ones we're doing now. So this link that we'll email you will allow you to access the Listening Pro webinar in its recorded version. So if you miss something today or just want to rewatch parts of it, by clicking that link, you'll be able to open up that webinar and watch again. And in fact, Allison in our chat box has just put in a little playlist, a link that's clickable for a playlist of any other listening materials that you have as well. All right, so I'm going to get started. I won't talk at length about myself other than to say I've been teaching for almost 24 years now. I started teaching in Ontario because that's where I'm from. I grew up in a little city called North Bay. It's about 4 hours north of Toronto, driving straight up the highway. And I moved to Vancouver in 2004. So since I landed here, I've been working exclusively in adult education, primarily teaching language skills, but oftentimes too, humanities courses and job readiness skills and so on. So it's so exciting for me to partner with Sarush as we have almost a very similar teaching background, if you will, and have a lot of the same skill sets. So it's a lot of fun to do this presentation with Sarush.
My pleasure.
All right. So before I get started, I'm just going to make sure we all understand what CELPIP's all about and which version of the test is right for you. There are two versions, if you will, that you see listed here, and we've color-coded them. So the red one on the left is the general version that most people would take because it's the one that you're going to take for your permanent residency applications. It's simply called the CELPIP General. It's the longer of the two CELPIP tests, and it's going to assess all 4 language components, namely your listening, reading, writing, and speaking in that exact order. So today's webinar is focusing just on the listening part, and we're doing listening first because it's the first language component you'll complete for CELPIP. We will provide another session on reading, one on writing, and one on speaking down the road. So most people take this test again to apply for PR status in Canada. Some people also take it though if they're looking to earn a professional designation. So there are many different organizations that would accept your CELPIP score for your professional career development. We've listed 2 examples here that tend to be more common based on the pool of test takers that we work with on a regular basis. So the CICC is one example, and this is your College of Immigration and Citizenship Consultants. The Real Estate Council of BC is another one, as I live out here on the West Coast, and our website lists all the organizations. So that's why you would take that form. The green version on the right would be simply called the CELPIP General LS, and LS stands for listening and speaking. That's because those are the only 2 language skills that you're going to be assessed for this version, but you would only take the General LS if you're applying for Canadian citizenship. That's really important for each of you. If you're looking to actually register for CELPIP soon, make sure please that you're registering for the correct version. Now, before we get right into listening, maybe in the chat box, can you let us know if anybody here is currently registered for an upcoming test? Today's Thursday, and I ask because a lot of our test sittings occur on the weekends. A lot of our test takers like yourselves, of course, would work and have other obligations midweek. So I'm guessing there's probably some of you writing soon. So looking at our chat box, we've got quite a few. Some of you are writing as early as September 1st. I saw the date just go by. And early October. Oh, Sunday, as in this Sunday, Simran? Today's Thursday, so that's 4 days from now. So a very special good luck to you if you're preparing. Okay, so you're in the right place then, especially if you've got a test already booked. So again, hopefully today's session will have you more prepared for the listening sections anyways. And Diksha also is saying Sunday. So there you go. And some of you are fairly new to CELPIP. So again, if you know nothing about the CELPIP test, welcome. This is our way of introducing to you the structure of each part so that you will be more prepared and you'll be able to study at home and so on. So for the next, I'd say about hour and 40 minutes or so of time, here's what we're going to do. This is our agenda. So first and foremost, I'm going to introduce what the listening test looks like. It is taken 100% on the computer. So I'd like to show you, especially if you're new to CELPIP, what the computer screens look like so you know what to expect. We're going to quickly talk about how the listening test is scored and also about the types of questions that you need to be prepared for to do your best. So that part will be fairly quick, hopefully 10 minutes or so. We're then going to jump right into the main content of your listening practice. So there are 6 different conversations or 6 different listening parts that you will complete on this CELPIP test, and you're going to complete them in this exact order. So for every single listening part, we're going to actually listen to a part of a conversation from a past CELPIP test. So all the questions we do together today were once upon a time real CELPIP test questions. You'll never see these questions on future tests. If so, I wouldn't be able to share them with you publicly, as you can imagine. But again, everything we do together today is authentic test practice. I'll play for you the conversations. We'll talk about note-taking. We'll answer the questions together and make sure everybody understands why the answers are correct. We'll do that for all 6 parts. And then I'll also introduce more of our study materials at the end. We've got lots of free materials and also some paid materials too. All right, so I'm going to jump right in to the listening test overview. And please, again, feel free to ask questions as we go in the chat box, and we'll make sure your questions are addressed. So when you start your listening test, before you actually begin your listening part 1, the very first thing you're going to do is test out your computer equipment. So when you take CELPIP, imagine yourself sitting in one test room, like a giant classroom, if you will. There are usually about 25 to 30 people in one test room at a time. You're all going to be seated at your own little workstation. So there will be a keyboard, a computer monitor, and a mouse in front of you. You're going to have little divider walls, if you will, to sort of block you from the people sitting on either side of you. It just gives you more privacy and allows you to focus on your own work. Throughout the entire test, you will be wearing a headset, and there will be a microphone attached to that headset. So this is how you listen to the conversations. The microphone is for the speaking sections later on. But this practice question you see at the top of your chart is a way just to simply make sure you can hear the audio. You're testing out your computer equipment. There is a volume button right on the headset, and you can make it louder or softer if you wanted to. So you'll get a practice question there just to, again, test your equipment, but it doesn't count for your score. And the moment that that question, that practice is done, you'll go right into part 1, and you'll see you've got a certain number of questions for every single part of this test. You've also got a specific number of minutes, and they vary, as you can see. So sometimes 6 minutes up to about 9 minutes or so. So you'll be spending just under an hour, roughly, completing your listening test, the first part of CELPIP. So a few things you should know about listening before you actually begin the real test. First of all, since CELPIP is used for Canadian immigration or for people that are working in Canada and so on, all of the speakers that you're going to listen to in the conversations, they all have what we call typically native Canadian accents. So I use myself as an example. Remember, I was born and raised in Northern Ontario. I now live in British Columbia. So even though I speak French as my second language, English is my first language. So my accent is what we might call that typically native Canadian accent. If you can understand my accent okay, you'll have no trouble understanding accents from the speakers on this test. And we say this is a benefit because we know English is spoken so widely around the world, but you don't need to familiarize your ear with other types of English accents, just the Canadian accent. So it'll give you something to focus on as you study, and then you'll be used to hearing that accent in time for the test itself. Now, here's where it might be a bit tricky for us that are just starting out with our listening practice. So first of all, the audio clips themselves that you hear, they play automatically. You don't just hit a play button and sit back and listen. The audio starts automatically, so you have to be listening immediately. There's no opportunity for daydreaming. Listen carefully. As that audio clip is moving forward, you can't pause them. And then the questions that you're going to answer will come after the audio has finished. So this is why we say, I think, to be extra sure that we're answering all questions correctly, it's so helpful to take some short notes as you're listening. You will be given paper and pen right in the testing center. So take advantage of that and jot down the important ideas, the 5 W's, the who, what, where, when, and why of the situation. And we're going to practice the skill today because it can be quite tricky. Yeah. So Alka, just to reemphasize that part, you cannot pause the audio note. It plays one time all the way through. You're taking your notes, and then your questions come right after the audio is finished. So you can have your notes in front of you as you answer the questions. And that's usually what people do. One other element, if you will, of the listening test is that the passages themselves will become increasingly more challenging as the test moves forward. So by that, I mean, listening part 1 will probably have vocabulary that you're more or less familiar with. You'll be able to follow along a little bit easier, perhaps. By the time you get to, say, parts 5 and 6, which is the last part of the test, you'll notice that the vocabulary is quite a bit higher level. Maybe the lengths of the sentences that the speaker is talking in could be a little more complex. Even the types of questions will require higher levels of critical thinking. And the test is designed this way specifically because people who are answering almost all questions correctly, straight through to part 6, these are the people earning top scores in the CELPIP listening test, which would be level 12. That's the highest score you can achieve. It's still very doable to achieve your level 9 or other high scores, even if you struggle a wee bit towards the end. But we do need to be prepared for this as we're studying. And as I say, we're going to do a practice question from each part today. So I think you'll see exactly what I'm getting at once we get there. Yeah. So Magdalene has an interesting question about the speaking speed. So I can't really give you on a scale of 1 to 10, which is what you're asking. But hopefully, my best advice might be if you could watch, say, the CBC News, which has Canadian content. Listen to typically, or people giving newscasts in English, right? They're practice public speakers. If you can follow along with the speed of what they're saying, that's pretty much what you can expect on your CELPIP listening test. So everyone has their own cadence or rhythm of speech in any language, really. But the speed on the test you'll find is natural. But what that means is it's not too fast, it's not too slow. Again, you'll see as I play you some examples today, and I'm hoping you'll be able to follow along with that as we go. And thanks for Allison has just popped in this little CBC radio link. That's a great one for testing your listening on your own time for studying. You'll learn some interesting Canadian content, but you'll get to hear practice public speakers talk. And it's great for listening skills. So I'm glad Allison has thought to share that with us. Thank you. All right, we have 3 types of questions that we have to know how to address as we move through this test. So we'll start with the one on the left here called general meaning questions. So these are your big, broad topic type questions. A very classic example would be, what is the main idea of this entire listening passage? So to answer these general meaning type questions, we have to draw on information from large chunks of the conversation. It might not be the whole conversation, but it will probably be quite a large part of it. So when you're looking at your notes, you're not just looking at one little word you've written. That's likely not going to give you an answer for this type of question. So we'd have to address a bigger part. Your specific information questions, though, are just the opposite. So these ones are actually going to focus you down on one particular detail. So again, looking at your notes that you've written, the question might ask you about a person's name based on an opinion they have, or it might be asking you about a location, a place where something was found. So you're looking for just that one tiny detail. And these types of questions tend to be a little bit easier because when you're focused on finding one idea, it's usually a lot faster to find in your notes. Inference questions, though, the last kind, these ones are probably the most challenging, I'd have to say. And that's because the answer choices themselves will not have been stated directly in the conversation. Instead, what we have to do is make some assumptions. We have to draw some conclusions. So understanding what we've just listened to, looking at the answer choices, you're going to choose the answer that simply makes the best logical sense. So these are the types of questions that do require those higher level critical thinking skills, as we mentioned earlier. You'll see more inference type questions as the test moves forward. You'll probably get more of the specific information questions earlier on when the test level is just a little bit easier. Okay. So with that in mind, let's talk about note-taking. So I've already mentioned that you will be receiving pen and paper in the testing room. So that part's easy. It's there for your use if you so choose to use them. Before I give you some tips about what I think note-taking should look like, can I hear from some of you, please, in the chat box? Some of you might already have practiced your listening and your note-taking. And if you've got any helpful tips about how we can record the ideas on our page, what types of details are you listening for? What does it look like when you write it down? Let's see if we can share some ideas to give others some other ideas too. Okay, Nadara Jan is saying key words, fantastic. Audrey is mentioning a mind map. We've got Aram suggesting abbreviations and symbols. Lots of people saying symbols and pictures and numbers, fantastic. Yeah, so I'm gonna just touch on that keywords as that was mentioned first. It's the first thing that I would have thought of too. And as a matter of fact, you read my mind because that's the first thing I'd written down as well. Keywords are the important details. So I always think of them as the 5 W's. So the who, what, where, when, and why. Your who and your what are definitely the most important. So again, if listening is tough for you, for now, listen specifically for those 2 points. You need to know who's talking, what's going on, and also like what the topic of conversation is. But when you write down these ideas, the trick, as you're saying, is to use short forms or abbreviations. You will not have time to write full sentences. You probably won't even have time to write the full word for each idea you'd like. So it's really up to each of you, each of the test takers, to find their own, what we call shorthand. We're all different, but if you can find a way to record those ideas that makes sense to you, that's all you need to do. Your notes are only seen by yourself. Nobody else will see these notes. The raters don't see them. Nobody looks at them but you. So if the conversation is about money, why not draw a $sign quickly on your page? And you'll know when you look back at that, that's the idea captured. It's a lot faster to draw a symbol or a picture, as some of you have been saying as well. Yeah, using those facts too. Another tip that I'd like to share is to point form. So when you're point forming ideas, you're generally starting at the top of your page and you're recording the ideas in a list down the page as well. And we'll look at how that appears in just a moment. But when you've got your notes there, another helpful tip is that the answers you're being asked on the test itself are generally phrased in the same order of the ideas that the speakers are talking about. So again, if you're starting your ideas at the top of your page and listing them down as the speakers talk about them, later on as you're answering questions, it makes your job easier. Oftentimes you can start here and just work your way down the list. So I find that much easier than trying to jump all over a piece of paper for sure. Okay, and I mentioned this as well. So as long as you can read your notes, and this is important, when you're practicing at home, when you're practicing taking notes, please practice writing your notes by hand. Use a pen and write it out on paper, because that's what you're going to be doing in the testing room. You're not going to have any opportunity to take notes on a computer. And a lot of us, I say this, it's funny, but it's not. A lot of us don't write by hand anymore. I think most of us use the computer for just about everything we do. So you do actually need to remember what it's like to write by hand and write your notes neatly enough so you can read your own handwriting. And I'm laughing now because my handwriting is awful. If you could see my handwriting, you'd know what I'm talking about. So just make sure you can read your notes, because that's all that matters. So I thought I'd share that before we move on. Okay, here's how your test is scored. So the scoring part itself is actually really simple. There are 38 questions altogether that are going to be counted as your score for your overall CELPIP listening test. So a perfect score on this test is 38 out of 38. And it's easy math because you get 1 point for every single answer that you give correctly. And in fact, it's the computer that's scoring the listening test. So we do have human raters. These are people that are professionally trained. They're going to be marking the speaking and the writing components that you do later on. But as far as the listening goes, and even the reading that comes next, it's the computer that's programmed to recognize if your answer is right or wrong. So again, the human raters never even look at your CELPIP listening test. Now, as you're working through, and has anyone here done CELPIP in the past? We have so many people online. I'm guessing maybe a few of you might have taken CELPIP before. You can let us know if you'd like in the chat box. And the reason I ask is, has anybody ever had an unscored part? So you'll know what I mean. If you've had one, you'll know what I mean. Okay, a few of you are saying, yeah, okay, I did. So I'd better explain what an unscored part is. So again, when you complete the listening test, a typical test would start at part 1 and just work all the way to part 6. So you do them in order, right? Part 1, 2, 3, and so on. Occasionally, not on every test, but on some test forms, there's going to be an extra part. So in other words, you might complete a listening part 1, part 2, part 3, and then you have a second part 3, and then you do your parts 4, 5, and 6. So again, that happens only once in a while. If you're one of the lucky ones to have one of those unscored parts, what that means is there's a relatively new test question that's being field tested. So before any question that you receive on a high stakes language proficiency test like the CELPIP or the IELTS or the TOEFL or the Pearson or what have you, before any test content can be accepted for immigration pathways anywhere, the questions have to go through a rigorous, strict procedure to make sure that they're fair and to make sure that they're performing at the same high standards that in this case, the IRCC of Canada would accept for your immigration journeys. So again, if you've got an unscored part, it's because we need to double check that that question is working well enough. Once we have empirical evidence to showcase that, yes, it's performing just fine, eventually it does become official test content. So down the road, it will count towards the score. But in the meantime, it's not. The trick is, though, you're not going to know which of those two parts is actually counting towards the 38 and which one is the unscored part. So you're going to have to try your best on every single question that you encounter on your CELPIP test. And I'll recognize right now, I'll acknowledge, nobody wants to do an extra question on any test, right? It's a long enough test to begin with. But I will say, if we can flip around the angle and look at this positively to say, doing one unscored part might add 10 minutes of your time to the test. it's also done because it has you, the test takers, interests at heart, right? We want to make sure the test is fair. And again, it's not just CELPIP that does this, by the way. Any language proficiency test has to go through these strict protocols. So that's what that's about. And some of you maybe were wondering why you had a duplicate part, and that's why it's an unscored part for field testing purposes. Okay, let's talk about good news now, silver linings. When you're completing your test, you can see there are 38 scored questions. If you truly don't know an answer on the test, please just guess. Don't leave it blank, because if you leave anything blank, there's no opportunity to gain an extra point. Whereas if you guess and you guess correctly, you'll actually earn that point. And every single point is going to get you closer to the 38 out of 38. So you're never going to lose marks for having an answer wrong. So really, you've got nothing to lose. The better way to go is to guess as the last resort rather than leave it blank. And that goes for all parts of your CELPIP test, the reading too. So I thought that was important to note. Okay, your last thing here, I'm hoping as I've been talking here, before I go on, Jana rather has a question about more time for the unscored part. So your entire CELPIP test takes about 3 hours to complete, but every single person that completes CELPIP has a maximum of 3.5 hours. So that extra half hour has been put in there to take into account that some test forms will have that extra part. So it doesn't keep you at the test longer per se. The time is actually already taken into account. So thank you for asking that. I think that's a really great question for clarification. And Mohammed is sharing that you're unlucky. You've taken it 3 times and you had an unscored part each time. Sorry. Yeah, that's really unfortunate. Maybe it gives you extra practice. That's the only way I can flip that around positively. But hopefully your next time, maybe you won't have one. Okay, Simran, I just finished discussing the unscored part. So maybe Sarush can type with you as I'm moving on, just so I don't lose our momentum. If you still have questions at the end of this session, I'm happy to stay behind a few minutes extra and we can talk about it again. All right, I wanted to talk about score equating quickly, which is the final point on your screen right now. So as we've been talking about all of these unscored parts, you may have been looking closely at our listening score chart, and I'm hoping that you've noticed there's an overlap in scores. So if you're looking right now at level 10 at the very top, where it says levels 10 to 12, you'll notice that to earn a level 10 for your CELPIP listening, you have to earn at least 35 points out of 38. But if you look just below that at level 9, you'll also notice the score of 35 is included there. So the question that we all need to ask is, well, if we score 35 out of 38, does it mean we earn a level 9 or does it give us a level 10? And the answer to that is what we call score equating. And it has to do with the difficulty level of the questions. So remember I said earlier that you're all sitting in one classroom, basically a testing room. You're all working on your CELPIP test at the same time. There might be 30 people in that room. Not everybody in that same test sitting has the exact same test questions. So there are different test forms, and that has to be done that way to safeguard the security of the test, as you can imagine. So even though the structure of the test will be the same for everyone, on certain test forms, there might be a few questions that are already considered to be and proven to be slightly more complex than, say, a few questions on another form. So if you can imagine for a moment that maybe you and myself were sitting side by side working on our tests, if my test form that I'm completing is one that's designated as being slightly more complex in just a few little areas versus yours, if we both scored a 35 out of 38, well, my test, the 35, would score a level 10 because it's considered to be just slightly more complex, whereas your test would be the level 9. And that's how that works as well. Again, it has to do with the difficulty level. We call it score equating. There's more of a write-up on our website, but I definitely wanted to explain what those numbers mean. We often get questions about it, so I thought it was a good way to start. Okay, let's move on. I think we're good there. I don't see any other questions for that. I know you're talking about webinars, so we'll address that at the end. Okay, I think everyone's good with that, then let's move on. So jumping right into your listening part 1. Get ready to take some notes, and I'm going to play for you some practice test questions here now. So when you are completing part 1, it's called listening to problem solving, basically. You're going to have 2 speakers talking. And on CELPIP, whenever there are two speakers, it's always going to be a man's voice and a woman's voice. And it just helps you to tell the difference between them a little easier as you're listening. So these two speakers in part one do not know each other. They're strangers. One speaker, though, is going to want to help the other, and oftentimes it's to solve a problem, which is why it's called listening to problem solving. So for example, you might have a supervisor talking to a new employee, and the supervisor will explain the tasks that that employee needs to do. You could have a customer who's asking a cashier to help them with a purchase, and that sort of thing. So all of the conversations on your listening test are actually based on real life situations. So these are things you probably have already encountered in life, or you can very easily imagine doing so. Now for part one, it is considered the easiest part of the listening test. So I look at the structure here as sort of a warm-up. It's the only part of listening that separates the conversation into three little parts. So you're listening to like the first part of the conversation, which will be about 1.5 minutes long. And then you're going to have just a couple or maybe 3 questions about that. And then after you've answered those questions, the computer will play the continuation or the second part of that same conversation with the same people. And again, you'll have a few more questions to answer. Finally, you'll have the third and final part of that conversation with a few questions left again. So it's a little bit easier for you to ease into your listening test, again, because the conversation's being broken down for you. You don't have to concentrate for quite as long at one go. Now, before you hear anything, there's always going to be a little introductory screen. It looks exactly like this. I'll read it out loud to you this first time, just so you have a sense of what it's going to sound like. So again, through this headset, an automated voice will say to you, you will hear a conversation in 3 sections. You will hear each section only once. After each section, you will hear 2 or 3 questions. You will hear the questions only once. Choose the best answer to each question. So for the first half of your listening, namely parts 1 to 3, after the conversations have finished, when it comes time to answer the questions, you're not actually reading the questions yourself. So instead, you're going to hear a voice read them out loud to you. And because you only hear the question one time, you have to listen very carefully. You don't have an opportunity to replay it. So this is sort of the real life application of somebody talking to you, asking questions, and then you have to give an answer or a response immediately. So that's what the CELPIP test is doing, is assessing your ability to communicate in a daily context. You will see a next button on every single computer screen. So I've just circled it for you in the top right-hand side. So the next button is used if you simply wanted to skip over a screen. So in this case, if you didn't want to sit and wait for the automated voice to read the screen aloud to you, you could click next and you could move directly over to the next computer screen. But as you can see, there's no back button. So once you click next, there's no opportunity to return back. So I say only use next if you're really confident. And I think as we get used to the structure of this test, so right now we're learning that in part 1, you've got a man and a woman. So this is a really great opportunity while that voice is reading aloud to you, the instructions for the part. This is where you're going to use those extra 10 seconds or so to set up your note paper, get it ready to take notes. So the moment the conversation begins, your pen is ready and you can start writing down ideas. That's what I would recommend. Anyway, you land on this page before the conversation starts to play, and it tells you, it says, a voice will read this to you. It says, you will hear a conversation between a man and a woman, and the conversation takes place in an office. So this is the only part of your listening test, sorry, 1 of 2, I should say, that gives you a little visual. You can see a picture of the 2 people. And I think sometimes just by looking at the picture itself, you should start to be able to come up with ideas or predict maybe what this whole conversation is going to be about. Now, you're already told it's a man and a woman, and it's going to take place in an office. So I think some of the details you can start thinking about is, who do you predict these 2 people are? Just have a look at the picture, have a look at the clothing they're wearing, have a look at the background that they're sitting in front of. Can you make a prediction before you even start to listen about who these 2 people are? Let's have a look in our chat box and see if we can get some ideas. So again, this is sort of pre-listening, if you will. I think really effective listeners, you have to verify your note taking, but I think before we even hear, we start to get our minds ready for what we're about to listen to. So yeah, a lot of you are suggesting, well, they're definitely colleagues. You can see that they're wearing, blazers or suit jackets and blouses and so on. It looks like filing cabinets and such in the background as well. They could be colleagues. They could be, as Morali is saying, a boss and an employee. That's another possibility as well. It looks like they're having some sort of a meeting based on, I don't know, she's taking notes or what she's doing. So you can start to ask yourself these questions, who are these people? What's their relationship to each other and where are they sitting and so on. So that's done very quickly. And then after that little introductory picture shown to you, you're going to be ready to start taking your notes. So this screen again is read to you. It says, listen to the conversation. You will hear the conversation only once, and it will remind you how long it is. It's about 1 to 1.5 minutes long. Now, when the audio is actually playing through your headset, you will see the word right here that says playing. All right, that tells you that you should be hearing the sound. If for some reason you can't hear anything, this is a moment in the test where you actually raise your hand, you pull over the test administration staff working in that room, and you explain to them there's something wrong with the equipment and they'll fix it. If there's a problem, fix it right at the beginning, of course. Now, you've already done your practice questions, so there shouldn't be any issues, but just in case, please know there are staff on site that could help you just in case something does go wrong with the headset. But this is what you will see. On the actual test itself, that little blue bar that you notice is going to move from the left all the way to the right. Right now, it's just a screenshot, so it's not moving. But again, it's the timer on the actual test. So if this is a 1.5 minute question or conversation rather, takes about 1.5 minutes for that blue bar to make its way to the end. And it's helpful for you to know when it's wrapping up. Because remember, you're going to be taking notes as they're talking. So you need to know how much more information there is to go as you're writing it down. Okay, so since this is the first listening practice that we're doing together today, what I'm going to do before I play this conversation for you is I just want to talk with you about how to actually organize the notes. Again, some of you might have already practiced this, and that's great. But if you're brand new to CELPIP or note-taking, I think it's really helpful to have some strategies. So remember, we already know we've got 2 speakers. So here's what I'd like all of you to do right now with me, if you can, please. You've got paper and pen, I hope, nearby. Can you just draw a 2-column chart? I call it a T-bar chart, just on your piece of paper. Doesn't have to be fancy, but just make 2 columns like this. And the reason we're using 2 columns is because we have 2 speakers. So because we know we have a man and we know that we have a woman, why don't we label those columns as such? In fact, you don't even have to write the whole word if you want to do this more quickly. You could probably just write the letter M for man and the letter W for woman. And you'll know what that means when you look back later on, which is fine. Okay, so now we're ready. Whenever the man says something of one of those keywords, one of those 5 W's, we're ready to write the ideas down under his column. And likewise, we'll do the same with the woman. Now, this is the very first part of a 3-part conversation. So why not number it as well as 1, right? We can go 1 and then 2 and then 3. So our notes are very organized. And it just makes your job a lot easier later on when you're using the notes to answer questions. Okay, so I'm hoping you've got this set up on your own note paper. This is what you're getting ready when the automated voice is reading the instructions to you. So it's nice and ready to go. So why don't we actually listen now to the first part of this audio? So again, it's about 1.5 minutes long, give or take. So I'm going to play it now. Can you try your very best to write down whatever keywords you can grab under the man's column and under the woman's column? Really focus on the who. If the names are mentioned, you can write them down, but really understand their relationship to each other. A lot of us think they're colleagues or maybe a boss and supervisor. I'm guessing that's probably one of those ideas is correct. So those are the types of things to listen for and to verify. And once we've got that, we need to figure out what they're talking about. So that's the main focus here as you're taking your notes. Okay, I'll play it for you now once. Please take your notes. After we've listened, I'll show you an example of a note for this conversation, and we'll compare ideas and see how you did. Here we go.
Hello, Ms. Jeffers. I'm Matthew, your temp from the agency. Yes, hello, Matthew. This way, please. I have you set up here. I'm afraid your task isn't very challenging, but it's just for one day. Please have a seat.
Thank you. What am I to do?
These boxes on your left contain envelopes. The boxes in the middle contain letters. I'd like you to put one letter into each envelope. Make sure you fold the letter like this, so the address shows in the window of the envelope. Then put it in this empty box on your right.
Would you like me to seal the envelopes as well? If you have a sponge and a little dish of water or one of those dabber things?
No. Fortunately, we have a machine that will do that.
Okay. Is that all? I don't need to answer any phones?
No, your task is simple. I'm sure you'll be quite sick of it shortly. I apologize in advance for that.
Okay, that's the end of the audio. Now, I had two people write in that they couldn't hear, and one person said they could. So we'd best do a little check-in here now. Is there anyone else that, okay, it looks like most people can hear the sound. If there's an issue with your own audio, I know it played clearly from my computer too. So it sounds like there might be a few people that are struggling. And unfortunately, technology is a little bit funny this way. Sometimes it works for some people, not for others. I'm assuming you can hear my voice, as nobody has complained otherwise yet. If you can't hear the actual soundbite, you'll have to check the settings on your own computer. For me, sometimes it's just the output on my system setting in my own laptop has been changed. So go into your computer now and see about the settings. Make sure you've got your input and output correctly. If it's still not working, I guess the best troubleshooting advice I can give is to log out and log back in again. And I'm hoping that that resolves it for you at any rate. Yeah, okay, so yeah, again, Sathi and Murthy, I think you can hear the voice, but not the audio. So it sounds like it's something on your own system because everybody else sounds like they could hear the audio. Am I correct there? You could hear the audio when I played it, sounds like to me. Okay, all right, well, other people are saying I'm ready for the answer, so let's move on. I don't know how your notes look, and before I share with you my notes, I want to recommend that everyone has their own way of taking notes. So provided you've got the main ideas, it's okay if your notes look completely differently from the notes that I've got on screen here. And keep in mind, the notes I'm showing you now are a little bit more detailed that you might even do on test day. I made them more detailed so that everybody could visualize the ideas. But what I want to make sure is we've all got the who. So the names were given for the man and the woman, and you'll see that we've mentioned them above at the very top in brackets. So the man's name is Matthew. The woman's name is Ms. Jeffers. So if you could capture those ideas, great. They might not be important, but if you manage to catch them as they're talking, I think that they're great to have. Okay, now right below the man's column, he's sort of got the ball rolling, as it were. He introduces himself as a temp from an agency. Can I ask you what a temp is? That's the word he used, actually, is a temp. Do you understand what the temp is? It's a short form. It's part of a word, but we actually use it when we're talking about work. Yeah, and you've got it. Temp means temporary. So what that means is the man is only in this office for a very short amount of time. So he's clearly the employee. He's the worker in this office. And the entire gist or the entire point of this conversation is that Matthew is asking the woman, Ms. Jeffers, what he's supposed to do in the office. So clearly she's the supervisor or the manager or the boss, however you'd like to think of it. So the bulk of this conversation is all about the job duties. You can see right under the woman's column, she tells Matthew that his job is not challenging. It's just for one day. Again, it's temporary. We already know that. And she starts going on in quite a bit of detail about all of these boxes and letters and envelopes. So every time she gave a new idea, it's really helpful for your own notes to try to write that idea down on a separate line. So here we've got dashes. If you wanted to put little dots, that's okay too. But it's helpful to do something. Use a symbol to separate out those details. So the very first detail she gives is that there's a box on the left. We use the letter L as a short form, and that's where the envelopes will go. Here are two little squiggly lines. This is so helpful for note-taking. When you're trying to take notes quickly, some of you said, I couldn't get all the details. because a lot of these details are similar, if you wanted to write down the same words here, like box, on, the middle, instead of writing the actual words, just by putting these little quotation marks, they're called, each quotation mark symbol in this case represents the word right above it. So this one represents the word box. This one represents the word on. And then we have a new word now. So we're saying middle, that's our short form. And this is where the letters will go. She wants Matthew to put one letter per envelope. She also asks him to fold the letter to show the address and put the letter in the box on the right. So again, whatever short forms you may have used is okay, provided you've got most of these details to the best of your ability. After this big long list of ideas, Matthew then has some questions. And you'll notice for every single question he asks, we've actually taken a moment to put a question mark. And I think this is super helpful. So Matthew is saying, do I need to seal envelopes? And she's saying, nope, a machine does that for you. Matthew then asks about, is there a sponge I could use? Is there water? Do I have to answer a phone? And once again, he's saying, nope, you don't have to do any of that whatsoever, right? So again, this is who Matthew is. This is what the job duties are going to be. And then we have questions all the way across. You notice too that whenever we have an answer to a question, it's really helpful to draw little arrows to connect them. So again, this is one way of taking notes. You might have a way that works much better for you, but I'm sharing with you some tips that I think are helpful if you're looking to take notes in a hurry and then be able to find answers in a hurry next, which is the next thing. Okay, so far so good. How did the note taking go? You might not have gotten every single detail, but did you at least get the who? And did you sort of understand that they're talking about job duties and what Matthew's going to be doing? That's the main part, that's step one. And then the other details are the icing on the cake. So once you've listened, once you've got your notes in front of you, you're then going to have all of your questions read out loud to you. So you can see right now that the answer choices are written here on the right-hand side. And the answer choices for this question are actually pictures. That's unusual, but it does happen, which is why we're going to practice one to give you a sense. Usually these would be words, but again, they're pictures for today. All right, so what I'm going to do next is listen or play the question for you. It's only going to play once. It's your job to listen carefully and then try your very best to choose the correct answer. You'll notice at the top of your screen where the timer is, it says right now 27 seconds. You actually have 30 seconds in total to answer every single question on this test, for the first part anyway. All right, you'll probably be able to answer this question faster than 30 seconds, but I'll play it for you now and we'll see how it goes.
Question 1.
What is at the man's workstation?
That's it. That's how fast these questions are. Takes about 2 seconds or maybe 3 to read out, and then you would have 30 seconds to make a choice. So if you'd like to answer the question, you can. You won't get a chance to replay the question. You would never actually, for parts 1 to 3, you don't get to read the question either. But just to help you out in case you missed it, since we're studying together, I've tried to summarize it for you here. So yeah, so the question says, what is on the man's workstation? So the pictures clearly symbolize those 4 objects they were talking about. So you've got a sponge, boxes, water, and a phone by the looks of things. So I'm doing a quick little look at my chat box, and a few people have guessed their answer and shared it already. So I'll give you another few seconds just in case you wanted to type in here. Yeah, this is the first question of all 8 questions you would answer in part 1. And every single person today has chosen boxes, which is absolutely correct. That is the right answer for this question. So again, just to double check, we know how we got that answer. Here are the same notes we've already talked about. And the only thing that might throw you off track here is the fact that all 4 of these objects were technically mentioned somewhere in the conversation. So that whole column from the woman talking about these boxes and envelopes, that's how we know the answer. There are boxes on the workstation. But remember, Matthew did ask questions about sponge, water, and phone. And those are the other 3 pictures here. But in our notes again, every single time he asked about one of these objects, Miss Jeffers said to him, no, you're not going to need those. So that's kind of 2 different ways, if you will, to know that boxes would be the correct answer. And it's also a reminder, just because you've heard a word mentioned in the conversation, it doesn't automatically mean that it's going to be the answer. So we still have to understand the question carefully and make sure that we're focusing on the right part of our notes. But that's a pretty typical or a pretty standard type question for your first part anyway. Okay, and you would complete the other questions in that part. So remember, there's a part 1. You would then listen to the second part of that same conversation. So all I would do to get ready for that second part is just extend your line in your notes. I would number it as number 2 and then even maybe separate it out. So you would follow these same procedures or strategies for the first, second, and third parts of the conversation. Okay, so that's your part 1. We won't do the rest of the questions today, as I wanted to give you a little bit of practice for each part. So let's move on. Part 2 is all about listening to a daily life conversation. You are going to have 2 speakers again. It's definitely going to be a man and a woman, but these speakers actually know each other this time. They're going to be discussing something that's happening in their lives at the moment. So again, you could have coworkers one more time. They could be talking about a work project. You might have a husband and wife who are making plans. Every single listening part for the rest of this test is going to be just one audio clip. There's not going to be anything else that's divided into chunks for you. All right, so the last audio we just listened to was about 1.5 minutes. In part 2, it's about 2 minutes. So it's getting just a little bit longer, which requires a little bit more concentration for your notes as well. So remember, you'll have a little screen read out loud to you. I won't take the time to read the whole thing out, but I will just point out, it always tells you how many questions are coming up. So you're going to have 5 questions, same format. We'll hear the audio, take our notes. You'll have 5 questions read out loud to you, one at a time, and then you're going to use the time to answer. Okay, so before the audio plays, we're introduced to who these people are. We have 2 colleagues, and we're told it's a man and a woman. And we're also informed that these 2 colleagues are at a break room at work. So before I play for you this second practice question, could you please start a fresh note paper? I think, again, because we have 2 people, a man and a woman, we can use that same 2-column chart. So if you'd like to set that up now on your notes, that would be helpful. You can even label them, again, man, woman at the top, just to keep the 2 columns straight, so you know where to put those details as well. All right. Shouldn't take you more than, I don't know, 5 or 6 seconds to do that. Again, which is about the length of time I suppose it would take to read out those instructions as well. So here's your audio page. It will read the instructions to you and remind you of the length, 1.5 to 2 minutes long or so. So I'm going to play the audio for you. Please take your notes to the best of your ability. Again, each time the man says something, jot down that idea under his column. Each time the woman mentions a key point, same thing. I'm not going to share with you my notes right after this time around. I'd like you to use your own notes you're making now to try your best to answer a question that I'll show you next. So here's the conversation first.
Hi, Naomi. How are you adjusting to the night shift?
I'm not. I can't fall asleep during the day, even though I put something over my eyes to block out the light and wear earplugs to block out the noise. So I'm really, really tired.
I read an article the other night about how the night shift doesn't fit our natural body rhythms. Most of us are built to rest at night. The article also mentioned that people who work the night shift often have concentration problems and even coordination problems.
Well, then I'm glad we're cleaners. Imagine operating heavy machinery or piloting a plane at night.
Yes, there are more accidents on the night shift. The article even said that police officers who work the night shift are angrier than those who work the day shift.
I believe that. My daughter asked me yesterday why I was so cranky. By the way, how do you deal with never seeing your family because you work the night shift?
My parents and siblings are overseas, so it actually works well for me to call them during the day when I'm at home. But I do miss the after-work things I used to do with my friends.
Yes, I guess it's hard to maintain a social life when you work the night shift. But on the bright side, there are no lineups in the grocery store.
True enough. Listen, we've got 10 minutes left on our break. I'll make you a cup of coffee to get you through the next couple hours. Do you drive or take the bus home?
Thanks. A coffee would be great. I take the bus.
Good. Tell the driver what stop you want to get off at and ask him to wake you up. That's what I do. Then you can try to get some sleep on your way home.
I don't know if I can, but it's certainly worth a try. Maybe the movement of the bus will rock me to sleep.
All right, that's the end. So you're looking again, right after the conversation's finished, you get moved right automatically to the questions. And you'll notice again, if you look on the right-hand side, it says question 1 of 5. So it keeps you on track. And remember how most of the questions are asked in the same order as the ideas that you were able to jot down. So I'm going to play the question for you now, and we'll see if you can answer it on your own this time. Feel free to guess into the chat box. How can you be guessing the answer now? I haven't even played the question. I don't understand. Everyone's saying 1. How do you know? I'm curious. How do you know what the question is going to be? Have you seen this webinar before? Is that what's happening? Okay, well, welcome back if that's the case, but it would be helpful if you could wait for the question before you guessed. Here we go.
Question 1. What are the man and woman talking about?
What are they talking about? You don't want to be guessing like that on the test. You want to make sure that you actually hear the question. Funny though. Okay, everyone's saying A. Before I reveal the correct answer, I'd also again like to give you just a chance to look at your notes that you've made. I really wish we were in a classroom so I could see your notes, just out of curiosity, as there's so many ways to take notes. But I would like to actually just again demonstrate what one example of an efficient note could look like. So I've got the question at the top of the screen, and on the real test, you're never going to read the question for parts 1 to 3. But this is the question in mind that we were just asked about. So what are the man and woman talking about? So your T column chart, I guess, would look like this with woman and man. The very first thing the woman said, if you recall, was that she can't fall asleep. So whenever I hear anything to do with a negative idea, I like to just put an X, the symbol, because it means no. So I think that's a pretty fast way to capture that. And I put in brackets there, it's because she's tired all the time. So I thought that captured her first point. The man spoke next and he said, well, it doesn't fit our natural body rhythms. So I chose to write the full words, body rhythms, as I was worried I wouldn't remember my short form later on. He then continued though, and he talked about concentration and coordination problems. So for me, that was enough to remember that detail. I used some short forms there as well. He also said that there are more accidents and people get angrier. So when you've got something increasing, think of a symbol that would make sense. So I like to use a plus sign. Some people like to draw an arrow pointing up, but again, do something to indicate it's increasing. So there are more accidents. She continued and she said, you're cranky. You never see your family. And then he mentioned that he misses the after work activities with friends that he used to do, I guess. And she finishes the conversation by mentioning that it's really difficult to maintain any kind of social life. So again, your ideas might look different, but I'm hoping you got sort of the gist of this conversation. And in order to answer this question then, where it says, what are the man and woman talking about? If you were indeed choosing A, you'd be absolutely correct. So they are talking about problems working the night shift. And I think one way as well to know how to use your notes correctly or efficiently is to even be able to identify the type of question this is. So remember when I introduced the whole test to you, I said we've got 3 types of questions. We've got general meaning, specific info, and inference type questions. So which type of question would you say this one is? When we see what are the man and woman talking about? Which of those 3 types is this type of question falling under, do you think? And there's a reason why I'm asking you. I'll see what you say first of all. Looks like we're guessing a few different things here. Oh, we've got all 3 questions are being guessed right now. Yeah, so sometimes figuring out the type of question is a little bit tricky. Okay, so I would say if you, again, look at those 3 examples there. This question does not focus on just one piece of information. So if you look at the other 3 answer choices we didn't select, answer choice B says their duties as night cleaners. Well, that would be a very particular detail. Or good articles they've read. That's another very focused detail, isn't it? Or the loud noise at work. That's so specific as well. So we wrote many points in the notes. We didn't just talk about one little detail. So there's no way we want to focus our attention down on just one entry in the chart. They're talking about this conversation directly with lots of examples, so we don't have to infer or assume anything. They're speaking to us directly as they talk. So this type of question is general meaning. In other words, what we're asking is, what is the main idea or the overall topic of this entire conversation? So every single entry I had in the chart, whether it was an idea from the woman about not being able to see her family, or the man saying he doesn't have a social life, all of those examples are examples of answer choice A, problems working the night shift. So when you understand that a question's general meaning, it reminds you to look at more or less your whole note, right? Or at least a large chunk of it. You don't want to get trapped looking at one little detail in that case. So again, sometimes knowing the type of question is going to help you figure out how to use your notes and answer the question. All right, so that's part 2. Let's finish off the sort of the first half of this test, listening for information. This is the last part that will actually read those questions aloud to you. And then the structure changes. So part 3 is listening for information. Once again, you'll have 2 speakers. They might know each other, they might not, and that really doesn't matter in this case. The whole point, though, is that one of these speakers has information that the other one needs. And that's why we call it listening for information. So for example, you might have a customer who's buying a new car from a salesperson. You could have an experienced employee who's, again, training a new coworker on their first day in the office. But it'll be one audio clip, and you notice again, it's a little bit longer still. So part 1, part 2, part 3, the conversations are getting just a little bit longer. So once again, it means a little more concentration from you as you're taking notes. So it's getting a bit harder, perhaps we can say. All right, so your instruction screen looks the same as you've seen before. Somebody will read this out loud through the headset. So you have 6 questions. This is maybe one helpful detail to know how many questions are coming. So once again, as this voice is reading the instructions to you, now's your opportunity to get your notes set up. So you know you've got 2 people. So again, it'll tell you roughly who these people are. So this is read to you. You will hear a conversation between a customer and a worker at a mattress and bedding store. So while that's being read, you're going to make, yet again, a fresh note. So please have a fresh note paper ready at home there. You can create a T-bar chart one last time, or one more time anyway, because you'll have these 2 people. Because it's 2 people for CELPIP, you know 100% that it's going to be a man's voice and a woman's voice. That much has already been established. So again, if you wanted to label your chart with man, woman, you could, or you could put customer, worker. It's really up to you. I guess as we listen, we'll need to figure out who's who. So we don't yet know if the man is the customer or the worker, and so on. So that's something that you'll confirm as you listen. Hopefully you've got your notes ready so that we can take our notes again for this part. So remember, this one's just a little bit longer than we've seen before. And I'll play for you the clip as well. And take your notes. We'll answer a question and we'll see how it goes. Here we are. There.
Hi. Thanks for coming to Mattress and Bedding World. How may I help you?
Hi. I'd like to buy a set of pillows.
Okay. Well, we have a promotion for the holiday season. If you buy 2 pairs of our new feather pillows, you get 1 free.
That sounds great, but my husband is allergic to feathers. That's the reason why we have to get new bedding. He keeps getting itchy eyes. I'm interested in getting some synthetic pillows.
Ah, I see. Well, we do have the synthetic filling, but there are actually a lot of alternatives you might want to consider instead of feather. Are you looking for a firmer pillow or a softer one?
I'm not sure. These are meant to be a Christmas gift for my husband. What are the different types?
Besides the synthetic, we have the memory foam and the latex, which are both really comfortable. If you want something good for neck pain, you might consider a microbead or buckwheat pillow.
Buckwheat? Really? I remember getting a little buckwheat pillow from my physical therapist that I could put in the microwave and put on my shoulder when it was sore. It was really nice, but I don't know if my husband would like sleeping on it.
Yeah, I'd only recommend the buckwheat if you really needs it for pain relief. I think your best bet for a nice gift would actually be the memory foam. It's a little more expensive, but it's our most popular pillow right now.
I've heard a lot about memory foam, but I've never actually slept on it. What is memory foam exactly?
Well, it was originally developed by NASA. You know, the organization that sends people into space? It's basically a foam with a cell structure that allows it to form around whatever it touches and then spring back into shape, so it never loses its shape. unlike other kinds of pillows. It really is comfortable. I use one myself.
Well, it sounds nice. I think I'll get these two. One for my husband and one for me.
Sounds good. Follow me and I'll ring these up for you. Would you like to take a look at our pillowcases as well?
Okay, that's it. I'm hoping you grabbed enough details there. So I will play for you a question here. You'll notice just before you hear it, if you look at the question and answer choices, this one says question 6 of 6. So this is the very last question of the entire conversation. So just as a hint, it might be helpful to look at the bottom section of your notes, right? Because again, a lot of the information does follow that same order. So you would have 30 seconds on the clock to make your choice, and I'll play for you the question now.
Question 6.
What will likely happen next?
Okay, so make your choice. Take a guess. Which one is correct? This is actually a harder type of question in general. So we'll identify the question type in a moment, but I'd like to answer the question first. Okay, it looks like a lot of you are going with option A. Okay, and again, on the real test, remember, you'd never get to read the question for the first 3 parts, but I'm just going to put the question here so we can see it. The reason I'm putting it there, what will likely happen next, is one more time, I really want to make sure we all understand what type of question this is. This one's really important. So there are those 3 types of questions we've already looked at a few times. When you hear a question that says, what will likely happen next? What type of a question is this? Super important to know. If you are only able to identify one type of question, this is the one I want you to be able to know for sure, right? And I'm going to circle the word that gives it away. The moment you see the word likely, 100% without a doubt, you know that this is an inference question, because you're basically being asked to predict what's going to happen as this conversation concludes. So you don't know for sure, you're not listening to the man and woman verify what the next part's going to be, since we stopped the audio. So you have to rely on, having understood what's going on so far to basically make an educated guess. Use logic to choose the answer that makes the best sense. And that's what you're doing when you're inferring something. So the word likely is one signal word that lets you know this is definitely an inference question. There are many other words in English that would also do this, and I'll just give you a few examples. So again, we could have said, what will probably happen next? Or what is implied at the end of the conversation? Can you tell what might happen next? This is the one we had, what will likely happen next? What is suggested to happen at the end of the conversation, and so on. So there's many ways to phrase it, but the reason why it's important to identify when you have an inference question is that the answer choices themselves will not be stated directly in the passage. So if you're actually looking at your notes right now, trying to find one of these answers, you're out of luck. It's not going to be there because it hasn't been discussed directly, right? So in other words, you're wasting your time. So we have to know it's an inference question, understand that we have to make an educated guess. All right, and again, it is question 6 of 6, as I told you earlier. So we are going to look at the bottom section of our notes. It just seems to make sense. So I don't know what your notes look like, but this is what I had. So I had the woman was the customer at the top. The man is the salesperson. So I needed to make that clear in my mind, which is why I put the brackets there indicating who was who. The woman finished her conversation by saying, I'd like to get these 2. And these 2 means that she's either holding or she's pointing to the pillows that she wants to buy. That's what they had been talking about throughout the entire conversation. And she even said she'll get one for her husband and one for herself. The man, though, he then invites her up to follow him, and he says he's going to ring up the items. And that means, if you can imagine in your mind, the man and woman walking together towards the cash register. He's going to ring them up, meaning he'll tell her what the total cost of those pillows are, and she'll pay him at the register. So once you've understood that's what they're talking about at the end, and you look back at those answer choices, 3 of them don't make any sense at all. So if she's already holding the 2 pillows that she wants to purchase, look at answer choice B. There's no need for her to go to other stores to check them out because she's happy with the 2 pillows she's found. And likewise, the man doesn't have to special order any other pillows because she's holding the 2 items that she's interested in purchasing. And last but not least, same logic, that bottom one, the man doesn't need to show her any more items because she's happy with the 2 pillows that she's holding. So we can eliminate all 3 of those answers as not making any sense at all based on what we've learned. We're only left with answer choice A, but it's correct, as most of you got it right as well. The woman will indeed purchase 2 pillows. That just seems to be the most logical step based on the conversation that we heard and what we're predicting is going to happen as that conversation continues. So that's a really nice example of an inference type question. All right, so this is the sort of halfway point of your CELPIP test. As you continue on from parts 4 to 6, this is the second half, you are going to notice a shift now, I think. The vocab is going to start to get a bit more difficult, but the structure of the test is going to change as well. And I'll show you what I mean here. So first of all, part 4 is listening to a news item. This is the first conversation that you've only got one person speaking. Could be a man, could be a woman, it doesn't matter. You've got one person though. And the whole point of part 4 is literally to listen to a news report. So you can imagine a news reporter talking to you on air, and they're trying to give you information to keep you up to date. So for example, it could be a speech all about new technology and how that technology can help people. You know, it could be an information piece about an interesting encounter with an animal, like a black bear that wandered into the neighborhood or what have you. So it's like a news item itself. Again, it's going to be one clip. It's only about 1.5 minutes. So interestingly, this conversation will be shorter than the last 2 that you've heard, but the ideas, the sentence structure, the vocab, they are going to be a little more complex. And you'll see that here in just a moment. So your instruction screen now is a little bit different from what we've been looking at before. So I will take a moment just to read this out to you and explain. So as that automated voice reads to you through the headset, they're saying to you, you will hear a news item once. It is about 1.5 minutes long, and then 5 questions are going to appear. Here's the different part. Choose the best way to complete each statement from the drop-down menu. So from this point forward, you no longer have a voice reading questions to you. Instead, you're still going to listen to the conversation, take some helpful notes, but then all the questions that you're going to answer are going to be displayed for you on one computer screen. You're going to see all questions at one time, and you no longer have 30 seconds per question. You're going to have a set timer at the top of your screen, and you've got that many minutes for the entire lot of questions. So in this case, we've got 5 questions. So you'll have, I forget how many minutes it is to answer all 5 of them. You'll see that in a sec. So you're reading the questions to yourself now. So we've switched the structure on you a little bit. Before you listen to the news item, the instructions will tell you at least what the main idea is. So this one that we're going to practice is all about a community power issue. So here's the trick. Because you've only got one speaker this time, so far this is all we've had to do. For parts 1 to 3, we had 2 speakers, and using a 2-column chart was really, really easy. But we've only got one speaker this time. So there's no way or no reason, I would say, to use a 2-column chart. So instead, we have to come up with a different way to take notes. And before I suggest one way to do that, do any of you have any ideas? When you're listening to a news report, what are the key details that you'll probably want to listen for? Does anyone have any suggestions for us? I don't want to use 2 columns. I mean, I don't see how that's going to be helpful. Oh, Satya and Murthy, you're so close. Rather than 4 W's, it's actually 5 W's. Yeah, you were close, but on the right track. Those 5 W's are, again, the who, what, when, where, and why of any situation. And that's what a news report gives us. A good news report anyway, that's detailed. So I think for part 4, this is how I go about it. It's going to take you a little more time to set this up because you've got 5 columns. But can you do this now, please, on a fresh sheet of note paper so you can practice? And the one tip I will give, though, is to make the what column bigger. Most details in any conversation, you're probably going to have the most number of details under what. So I think just giving yourself more space to actually write is probably helpful for organization. But at any rate, while the instructions are being read to you during the test, this is what you can start jotting down on your note paper so that it's ready to go. It'll give you just a few extra seconds in case you're getting them set now. So who, what, When, where, why? Okay. Before I play the audio, please again remember that there's going to be lots of detail. You might not get every single detail for all 5 columns. So what I'm going to ask you to do is prioritize your listening on the who and the what. Those are by far the most important columns that you'll need to worry about. If you can grab that much information, you should be able to answer most questions. If you can catch the when, where, why, that's excellent, but that's the second step. That's for perhaps more advanced listeners or people who have practiced a lot and are able to catch those as the speaker's talking. So do your best, but at the very least, please do capture the who and the what. It's probably going to help you out the most. So again, it's about 1.5 minutes in length, and I will play for you the whole conversation now. Hopefully you're ready to take your notes. After you've heard this, I'm going to show you my notes and we'll compare just to see how it went. Here we go.
Due to the high winds over the weekend, many trees came down in our community, several into power lines. Consequently, 100 residents were without electricity for several hours. This is nothing new for most of us, but for Inish Chandra, the experience was anything but routine. A fallen tree caused a live power line to land in her backyard. Fortunately, when she opened her door to let her dog out before retiring for the evening, it refused to move. Puzzled, she shone her flashlight into the yard to investigate and saw the downed power line, only then hearing the buzzing sound. Later the next day, Mayor Pine announced that this problem was actually getting worse. He suggested burying all the power lines or cutting down all the trees within 30 feet of a power line. He admitted, however, that both solutions are too expensive to consider and that the latter would be a shame. Residents are reminded to exercise extreme caution during a power outage. Any wire on the ground or hanging from a pole should be considered live and be avoided. Fires should be reported immediately.
Okay. One of you had asked about the speed at which people talk earlier. I do find that this one is a little bit faster than the other examples that we've heard. It is, again, part 4. So one might argue as the test moves on, that's an element. Hopefully it wasn't so fast that you couldn't catch the details. At any rate, this is one version of notes. Before we panic, let me explain that the words in the what column are probably a little more detailed here for reference. If these were my real notes during a test, I would have found more short forms to capture because I don't think you would have had time to write down all those words. But again, just to demonstrate the ideas, it's helpful for us all to see the words on the page as well. So you probably don't have quite as much on your own notes, but let's at least compare and double check that we've got the right ideas. So the very first thing is under the what column, actually. So the beginning of any conversation should introduce to you the main idea. We already knew it was a community power issue. The test instructions told us that. So we get more info about that right away. And the speaker here told us under the what column, it says that there are many trees that have come down into power lines and 100 residents were without electricity. So that part we had to understand. Okay, now if you happen to capture that it happened on the weekend in the community, if you go across the top of the chart, that's great. But those details are probably not that important. We might have needed to know the why. You know, the high winds is what's responsible for bringing those trees down. So that might have been a good one to write down. There were only 2 people introduced to us here by the speaker. And the first one is Inish Chandra. And Chandra was explaining that I assume Chandra is a resident living in this community because it sounds like Chandra saw a tree that was actually down on a live power line. And she noticed this when she let a dog out. She saw that line down and then she heard the buzz of electricity. And this was in her own backyard. And then a little bit later, the speaker introduces us to, or talks about the mayor. And the mayor's name is Mayor Pine. And I guess Mayor Pine was talking to the community and explaining that this whole situation seems to be getting worse. The mayor suggests burying those lines or cutting down the trees as a possible solution, which of course would cost a lot of money and be a shame, I guess, because they're beautiful. We don't want to cut the trees down. And then right at the end of this entire news report, the speaker says that residents are reminded to take caution, to be careful. Any wires that we see, we should consider to be live and avoid them. And if there's a fire, of course, report it immediately. So again, you'll notice we're using arrows and little symbols and such. Now, we don't know for sure if the mayor was the one that are reminding people to be cautious or not. It sounds like something the mayor could say. So that's sort of why we continued it down from the Mayor Pine section, but it could just be the conclusion as well to the entire news report. Okay. You've got only 5 questions to do here. You see the timer at the top. So again, you've got a set number of minutes to answer all 5 questions. And this time, as you can see, you're reading the questions through, and then you're going to click that little drop down arrow, and it's going to pop open the 4 possible answer choices. So we're going to practice question 5, the very last one of this bunch, and I'll make that bigger so you can see. So this says the news item ends with, so you're going to use your mouse and click on that little drop down arrow, and it pops open these possible choices. So we've got analysis, criticism, questions, instructions. You might be able to answer this question now based on your own notes and based on the notes I've just read out loud with you as I went over them in a lot of detail. Even if you didn't take notes, think about it logically. It's a news report. Can you imagine how a news report maybe would end, or which answers could be incorrect? And as you're doing that, I do see some answers coming into our chat box. I'm just going to quickly make sure we know what some of these words mean. So analysis itself is maybe something to consider carefully or to discuss. And criticism we might know, but it's a negative judgment, almost like if someone was pointing the finger of blame about something going wrong. I think we know what questions and instructions are. So that I thought might have been helpful. And I think too, just to verify this, the question says the news item ends with. So where are you going to look in your notes to make sure you've got the right answer? All those notes we took, where are you going to look? The news item ends with. So look at the bottom of your notes. And because all 4 of these answers are things, it just makes sense to look at the what column. That's how I would do this. So again, I think being a test taker is just, or being an effective test taker, saving yourself time, it's picking up on these little clues. It's knowing where to look first so that you don't waste your time looking at everything just to answer one question. So yeah, save ourselves the time. Let's look at the bottom of our notes. Let's look at the what column, since that seems to be with the topic at hand here. So when I look at, again, these notes where residents are reminded to be careful, wires that we see are considered live, avoid them, report fires immediately. That doesn't seem to have anything to do with analysis. We're not carefully considering anything. So I would say it can't be analysis. There's nothing there that's pointing the blame or being critical about the situations. We're just basically being told what we need to do to stay safe. I don't see any questions in our notes. And again, a news report probably wouldn't end by asking you questions. That would seem very unusual to begin with. So the only item we're left with is instructions, which is, as a matter of fact, what almost everybody has guessed in our chat box. And again, when you look at each item here at the bottom of the what column, that's exactly what these are. We're being told what to do, and that's a form of instructions. Now, on your real test, you're not going to have a transcript. You just have to listen and take your notes. But I'm going to show you a transcript quickly, just so we can double check where our notes came from and compare them to the words that the speaker just said. Right? So again, when you look at your transcript below, it's residents are reminded to do these things. And those 3 items we've circled in our notes are here. Consider wires live, avoid them, report them. So these are all clearly instructions. So when you click on whatever answer choice you select, in this case, we're going with instructions. When you click on that, it's going to get entered right into the blank by the computer. And it's going to be in green print, just so your eyes can visually see that you've answered that question. If you want to change your answer during the test, by the way, just click on the same word. So here you could click on instructions, and it would just open up those answer choices again. And you can change your mind as many times as you need to before that clock gets to 0. But whatever you filled out here for these 5 questions, the moment that clock at the top reaches 0, the computer will move you on to the next part. So in this case, it would be listening part 5. So please keep an eye on your timer and make sure you've answered something, even if you have to guess. Do not leave it blank. That's just, I hate giving away marks on a test. Don't leave it blank. There's no opportunity for marks at that stage. Okay, and I like the way that Sarush is applauding for all of you who got, I think, because you all got the answer right. So that's nice to see too. Nice to have the support, eh? All right, let's do part 5. Part 5 is tricky, but it's kind of fun because it's a video. So I'll show you what I mean. You're listening to a discussion. This is the only part of your listening test where you've got 3 speakers this time. They all know each other. So you might have, 2 men, 1 woman, something like that. They will be talking about one main topic, but they're going to be sharing their feelings about that topic. They might agree with each other on some aspects and disagree on others, but they're having a nice, good old discussion. And it's your job to figure out what each person is saying and what each person is thinking about the topic at hand. So for example, classmates could be discussing some sort of a school project. Neighbors might be planning a block party, talking about activities and so on. But it's going to be a video, about 2 minutes in length. So a little bit of multitasking is required. You're watching a video, you're taking notes with the key points, and then you are going to use your notes taken to answer your questions later. Okay, and the instructions remind you of that. You're going to watch a 2-minute video. You have more questions to answer here. You've got 8 altogether. And then you'll use the drop-down menus. So before you see the video, you will be introduced to who the people are. You'll have their names. So here, if you look quickly, looks like we've got a woman named Anna, and then we have 2 men, and their names are Paul and George. We're told that they're on a break at work. So again, while this screen is being read out loud to you through your headset, this is where you want to take the time to set up your notes. So here's your note paper. You've got 3 people this time. So let's make a 3-column chart. That just seems to make sense. So can you please go ahead and do this from home? So you've got 1 column for each person. You know that these are coworkers on break. So you could write that down if you wanted to. You probably don't have to if you just remember it. You've got the 3 names of the people, Anna, George, and Paul. What I would recommend you do is before you start writing their names in, right before the video plays, you're going to see a little screenshot, just like you're looking at here. And like a narrator, an automated voice is going to introduce these people to you. And you'll see their names on the screen, just like you see here. So this is the moment where I would like for you to write the names of these people in your chart in the exact same order that you see them. So sometimes it's hard to remember people's names afterwards. Once this video finishes, you might forget who's who. So if you could write down Anna's name in that left column, George's name at the top of the middle column, and then Paul's name for the right column. It's going to help you visualize in your mind who said what. If the guy on the end was speaking, well, that must have been Paul. So you're going to write your information under his name. So that's just a tip I would share. You can try that and see if it works for you. Now, this is going to test your ability to understand what they're talking about. This is not a memory test. So you're not going to be asked later on to try to remember, what was on the table in the break room. That's not going to happen on the CELPIP test. From time to time, though, you might get a question that looks something like this. What was George, says the man in the brown shirt, worried about? The only reason the detail about his shirt is included is to help you remember which one was George. So George was in the brown shirt. Paul is wearing, looks almost like a beige shirt to me, right? So that's an acceptable type of question on the test because we're focusing on what he's worried about, and the color of his clothing is just helping you remember which man he was. You would never get a question like this. What color was George's shirt? That's just not going to happen. Again, it's not a memory test. And as Ines has just shared in the box as well, you're saying, well, the 2 guys kind of look alike. I mean, they both have the same hairstyle, etc. So that's precisely why the color of the shirt they're wearing has been included in this question, just to separate that out for you. Yeah, exactly why it's been given that way. And you know what? You're right. I know Paul in real life. He's an actor who performs plays on Granville Island. He does a lot of improv. He's great. So I know him in real life. So for me, it's easy to remember who's who. But truthfully, now that you point that out, if you didn't know either men, when you look at them, actually, yeah, they do look fairly similar, don't they? It's kind of funny. But yeah, focus on the color of their shirt usually would give you that detail, and the order in which they're sitting at the table as well, right? Okay, so here's the video. I'm going to play for you just a little bit of the video. We're not going to listen to the whole thing, just for time's sake. So I think it's about a 35-second excerpt of the 2-minute video I'm playing. So you've got your notes handy, I hope. Please write down whatever those three people say, write down their details under the right column, and we'll do one practice question together.
Can you believe that announcement today? I mean, I'm still reeling.
I think everyone in the office is in shock. I mean, 3 weeks is not enough notice that we're moving the whole office all the way across town.
That's an extra hour of commuting for me each day. I can't believe they didn't consult with us beforehand. Do they think that they can just do whatever they want and we'll just go along with it?
I don't know. I've always found management here to be really respectful. I'm sure they wouldn't do anything like this unless it was absolutely necessary. It makes me wonder if they're running into some kind of financial problem or something. I mean, I know that the rents in that part of town are a lot cheaper.
You know, the sales force has been having some real problems. But still, you can't spring a move like this with only 3 weeks' notice. I just moved to a new apartment to be closer to work. I should have stayed where I was. Now I have to buy a car.
Okay, and again, in the test itself, that dialogue would continue, but we're just going to stop it there for time's sake today. And of these 8 questions then, we're going to do number 2 as a group. We're doing question 2 because I think it's the hardest question of all of these. And frankly, it's the grammar that makes this question tough. So I wanted to talk about it with you just to make sure we know what we're doing here. So let's read the question. Good starting point. Question 2 says, what would Paul, the man on the right, so look at your right-hand column, have done if he'd known about management's decision sooner? So before I even show you the answer choices, here's step 1. We need to know what management's decision is in the first place. So based on what you just remember hearing, based on what you wrote down in your notes, what is management doing? What is their big decision? You have to understand this, otherwise it's really hard to answer the rest of the questions. So what is management deciding to do? What's going on here? I haven't seen it yet. Aha, Praveen, you're right. I wish you would have made that public for all of us to see, but lots of other people are also chiming in. Yeah. So management has decided to move the office, and they're moving basically across town, so far away from wherever the office currently was. So we have to know that first. That's step 1. Step 2 says, the question itself is asking what Paul would have done if he'd known that the office was going to move across town. So the moment you see that word if, it tells you that Paul actually didn't know. If is a conditional, if is an imagined situation. So if Paul had known, well, he didn't know. He did not know that the office was going to be moved. We have to recognize that first. Then as we look at the answer choices, it makes a heck of a lot more sense. So what would Paul have done if he'd have known that office was going to move? Would Paul have A, purchased a new car, B, worked to increase his sales, C, stayed in his previous apartment, or D, begun to look for a new job? Some of these ideas were actually discussed in different parts of the conversation. So you can't get tricked up by just having heard a word and grabbing onto that to answer the question. So the best thing you probably could do right now is to, again, look at your notes. We're focusing on Paul. Look at the very bottom section of your column for Paul. That was the man on the right. Hopefully you've got some ideas written down there that's going to help you answer this question. And I do see some good guesses coming in. All right, as you're doing that, what I'm going to do to try to be helpful, this will not happen on your real test. I can't be there with you to give you the sentences from the dialogue. But just so we can all make sure we understand, Paul said right at the end of that video, he said, I just moved to a new apartment to be closer to work. And he says, I should have stayed where I was. So you can imagine the situation, right? He says, I just moved to be closer to work, but now that office has moved all the way over here. So Paul's saying, if only I'd have just stayed in my original apartment. So once you've got that under wraps and you've understood that, looking at those 3 possible answers, this is the one that makes the best sense. So what would he have done? Well, he would have just stayed where he was. That's what he says at the end anyway, right? He does mention, he says at the very end, he does say, now I'll have to buy a car, right? When he mentions the car, which is answer choice A, he's saying that that's going to be a future action. That's going to be the result or the consequence. So this is why A is not correct. You know, he wouldn't have bought a car earlier because he didn't know the office is moving. So I mention this because sometimes you will see vocabulary words in the other answer choices that are wrong, but they were sort of discussed in the dialogue. So it's always a matter of putting the ideas into context. So this logic makes perfect sense. Again, you know, I didn't know the office was going to move, so I moved to be closer to it, but oh, the office is now all the way over here. If only I could go back in time and just have stayed in my original place. So that's the line of thinking here. Okay, so anyway, the right answer gets fitted into the blank there as well. So this is a grammar thing. Working with if conditionals does make a question a whole lot harder. And again, we're in part 5, so it makes sense that you're going to have these higher level constructions there as well. All right, you did well with that though. It looks like a lot of us are catching on. So we're going to finish today now with the very final part of the CELPIP listening test, which is the hardest. It's called listening for viewpoints. And viewpoints are actually like people's opinions or people's perspectives. So once again, you will have one speaker only. And the speaker is going to introduce to you the main topic, whatever it's going to be about. So let's just say, for example, it could be a speech all about climate change, what we can do to hopefully resolve it so we don't have those fires and floods anymore. You know, maybe it's a speech all about the effects of a technological development. So whatever the main topic is, at some point in this, this audio clip, the speaker is going to introduce for you different people's names. So here's what I'd like for you to do as you're practicing your note taking now. The moment you hear somebody's, or sorry, first of all, identify the topic. That will be given to you right at the beginning. But right after you know what the main topic is, it's important to catch the people's names. There might be 2 of them, might be 3, even 4. But the moment you hear a person's name, write it down. It's more important to catch the last name because this is a formal news report, if you will. So the last names are going to be more helpful to you in the questions later. You might not even see the people's first names. So the last names are key. Write down that person's name, write down what their opinion is based on the topic, and then try your very best to figure out why they feel the way they do. That's what makes listening part 6 difficult. There's a lot of inference involved and understanding hidden meanings. You know, well, that's how they feel about the topic, but why? What did they say? How do I know that that's how they feel that way? So we'll do a practice, as I say, together. So it's one audio clip. It's the longest one of the bunch. It's 3 minutes long. So there's lots to work with here as you're focused, and you'll be tired. It's the last part of listening. So you just have to hang on for 3 more minutes and answer the questions correctly. So again, it's a 3-minute speech. You've got 6 questions to answer for this very last part. And again, it's going to have the drop-down menu as well. Yeah, Praveen, and it's funny you should say that. Praveen just wrote into the chat box about it's a knowledge test. Every time I give a webinar, I find people are a little surprised to realize that they actually have to use logic and critical thinking in tests. I say, yeah, of course. It's a language test. So yeah, vocabulary and all those grammar points are important, but it's not good enough to just know what a word means on its own, right? Or to understand what simple past tense looks like by itself. I think people, in order to survive and excel in any community, in any language, it's a matter of putting those skills together and amalgamating them so that you're actually understanding the meaning behind it. So that's what CELPIP is for. It's to test your ability to communicate, not just day to day with your friends and family, but also perhaps in the workforce and so on, where you would need to have these skills to be successful. Yeah, anyway, that's a little aside, I guess. This practice question we're doing, and every listening part 6, it'll tell you the topic, but this one that we're going to finish with today is all about advertising in children. So at least the topic's given to you, so you've got a little bit of a mindset that you can start preparing for. Some people like to actually write the topic down. It's really up to you. I myself wouldn't. I just wouldn't take the time. I think I can remember that easily enough because it was on the test instructions. But again, for this last part, I think I'd like us to do a 3-column chart. If you could make this now, if you wanted to practice. I would make my first column the who. And every single time you've got a person's name, that's exactly where you're going to write the name down. Last names are important. The what comes next. So this is what the opinion is. And you can guess the last column is going to be why. So we have to have the who and the what. The why is helpful. It'll be important for some questions, maybe not all. So again, if you're going step by step, definitely focus on the who and the what. If you can catch the why, wonderful. But right now, it's most important to get the who and the what. We'll do it that way. Okay, it is a 3-minute conversation or clip. I'm only going to play the first 35 seconds. We're just going to focus on one person and that one person's opinion to make this a little bit easier as we practice. All right, so I hope your charts are ready to go. Your who, your what, your why. I'll play this last clip for you and we'll see how you do.
The increased amount of television advertising aimed at young consumers has led some parents to question whether such targeting has negative consequences. Kathy Chen is a concerned mother of 3 young children. She recently started a parents' network that is advocating for constraints on advertisements aimed at children. Chen's personal concern is that advertising to children is unethical because it causes children to nag their parents for products, harming parent-child relations.
And so on. So again, in the test, we know that would continue, but you've just heard about 35 seconds to give you a taste. So there are 6 questions. Since we've only heard the very first part of it, we can really only answer the first few questions right now. So we're going to learn more about Kathy Chen. She was the one mentioned in this conversation. You'll notice as you look at question 3, 4, and 5 talk about a second person named Ralph Greenman. So we didn't hear about him, but we have questions only about Kathy Chen and Ralph Greenman. So this dialogue actually is one of the easier ones I've seen. It's only got 2 people. Sometimes there are 3 or more. Anyway, Kathy Chen is responsible for, this is our question we're trying to work on. Here are your answer choices. So this is the hardest part of your CELPIP. The ideas are much longer than we've seen before. We're well past the stage of pictures and one-word answer choices. So we've got longer phrases to work with, and I'm going to read them out loud for us now just to get our mind around what we're talking about. So is Kathy Chen responsible for A, creating a children's advertisement-free television network, B, beginning a group that advocates for more children's TV programs, C, banning children's advertising from state broadcasters, or D, pressuring for limits on advertising to young children? So oftentimes here, your answer choices are just going to summarize people's viewpoints. So coming into your CELPIP with the ability to paraphrase and understand those ideas is going to help. So before we just go right to an answer, let's make sure we know what we're doing here. What can you tell me about Kathy Chen? Can you please look at your notes right now? What did you write down about Kathy Chen? I noted 3 points. So I'm wondering if you caught the same 3 points that I did. So under my who column, I wrote her name, Kathy Chen. Under the what column, I have 3 points. I'd like to know what your points are, and then I'm going to show you my points. Who is Kathy Chen? Why is she even mentioned in this little news report? What's the significance of Kathy Chen? Why is she important to the topic of advertising in children? Okay, good. Yeah, looking at my chat box. This is so important. So first and foremost, everybody should have caught right at the beginning that she's a mom. She happens to have 3 young children. So now you can start to understand why she's been brought into this discussion about advertisements like commercials that are aimed at kids. It makes sense now. That's the background. She started something though, this is the easy part. She's a mom, she's got kids. She started something. It's kind of like a business idea. Did anybody catch what she started? I'm going to have a look at my chat box and see if anybody was that detail oriented here. I don't see the right answer yet. What did she start? Yeah, Dimitro kind of has it. I think it's just your wording. Yeah, and Paragi now has it too. Yeah. So she started a parents network. That's important, and I'm going to show you why right now. So again, on the test, you're not going to have a transcript, but being helpful, I'm going to show you the transcript so we can see how these ideas are coming from the speaker's mouth into our notes. So those yellow highlighted parts in the transcript, I did that myself just to show us those 3 details is how we got to the notes that you see posted. All right, so we're going to continue now. We know that she started this parents network. And the next part the speaker told us is that the network is advocating for constraints on advertisements aimed at children. Vocabulary, hey, it's tricky. Definitely tricky. So we're going to break it down. Advocating for in yellow here. I'd like to know what a simpler word for advocate is. Does anyone have a really nice, simple, common, everyday word that we can use just to help us remember what this word means? What's a synonym for advocate? If you're advocating for something, you are, no, I don't see it yet. So this network she's creating is advocating for constraints on advertisement. It's kind of like, it's not really fighting anything. No, it's not teaching. No, not really even standing for it. The action of advocating is kind of like promoting somebody and supporting. Okay, we're getting closer. Those words, I guess, would make sense in this context, but even simpler, like when I'm trying to learn a new vocab word, I go for the simple one that's easiest to remember. So if you're advocating for these constraints, you're actually asking for these things to happen. You're calling for them. You're supporting them. Yeah, you're speaking in favor of them. When we advocate, though, and here's the part I want you to remember from this point forward, when we advocate for something, we're convincing somebody to make a change, and it usually happens in the public eye. Almost always it's around a law or a bylaw. So I think that's a really important connection to make. So this Kathy Chen, who's a really worried mom of 3, is basically asking for, like asking the television networks, I guess, for the next really hard part is constraints. She wants constraints on advertisements aimed at children. And I'd like to know what that word constraints means. What's a synonym for constraints? Try to make it as simple as you can for now, just to help us remember. There's probably a few words. Okay. Oh, wow. We have lots of really great words. Actually, I think those are the 2 that I thought of as well. There maybe aren't as many as I thought, but yeah, limitations or restrictions. You've got it. That's what a constraint is. So doesn't that make sense? When you think of Kathy Chen, and we go back to the notes that we just made, we've left off right here. So she started that parents network. We want to take that yellow bit about advocating for constraints on advertisements. That's really high level. So let's make it easy on ourselves and just write it into our notes in simple terms that we understand. So Chen has started this parents network that is calling for limits on ads for kids. You can see the shorthand there. She simply wants to limit the number of advertisements. She doesn't want so many advertisements on TV or what have you for the kids to watch. That's why she's so concerned. Okay, so I think when we go back to our question, the question says Kathy Chen is responsible for. I don't even think we really need to know why per se. Like I'm guessing she wants to limit kids just because she's a concerned mom. She probably wants her children to do other more productive things than to watch TV or video games, etc. That's just a surmise on my part. You don't even really have to think about it too hard. I think we've got enough detail just on the notes we've made to understand what she's responsible for. So I'd like to go through these answer choices one by one to eliminate the wrong answers. And the reason I'm doing it this way is I want you to recognize vocabulary matches between the notes you've taken and the answer choices. Sometimes it's a matter of noticing one word difference. It's going to let you know if that answer is right or wrong. So this is how detail-oriented we're going to be. So answer choice A says to create a children's advertisement-free television network. Look at her notes, please. And in the chat box, can you tell me, is Chen responsible for doing that? Yes or no? Did she create a children's advertisement-free television network? Yes or no? Have a look at the notes, consider your answer, and then let me know in the chat box. Yes or no, did she do this? Okay, people are saying no. I agree with you. Answer choice A is not correct, but how do you know? She didn't create a children's advertisement-free network. What did she create? Please look at the notes and tell me. What did Kathy Chen create? It wasn't a children's advertisement-free network. It was a, what one word? Thank you, Blessing, you have it. It was a parents network. It wasn't a television network. All right, so again, just by, and that's such a small detail, but you have to notice it. Otherwise, you might have got sucked into answering choice A, which would be wrong. So we know that's wrong because our notes tell us so. So let's get rid of answer choice A. Moving on to B. Was Kathy Chen responsible for beginning a group that advocates for more children's TV programs? Was she advocating? Was she calling for? Was she asking for more children's TV programs? This one's a lot easier, I think, based on the discussion we just had. Does she want more children's TV programs? And I'm hoping you're all saying, no way, because she wants to limit the number of ads for children. There's no way she's asking for more. So let's just cross that one off the list as well and move on. Okay, choice C says to ban children's advertising from state broadcasters. What does the word banning mean? We haven't talked about that yet because we've not yet seen it. This is the first time. When you ban something, it means you stop something outright. The note says she limits. She wants to limit the number. Limiting, though, just means to make less, and banning means to stop outright. So they're close in meaning, but I don't think they're close enough. So I'm just going to put a question mark for now, because I can see how they're kind of related. But let's look at choice D, and let's just hope that it's much clearer in connection. So choice D says to pressure for limits on advertising to young children. Pressure for limits. There's that word limits. There you go, right? Pressuring for limits is the same as calling for limits on ads for kids. So if you had to choose between choices C and D, you can see that answer choice D is 100% match from the ideas we learned about and wrote in our notes. Again, C was associated. You know, we're still trying to get rid of some advertisement, but the word banning is just not close enough to limiting. There is a slight difference. And again, when you see pressuring for limits, you know that that choice is just so much clearer. So this is the correct answer. That's the one that you chose, and you would click it and insert it into the blank. So it's tough. Part 6 is tough, but again, with practice, that's all we can do. It all comes down to effective note-taking, and it also comes down to having a pretty strong vocab coming into the CELPIP test to understand some of those bigger words. Okay, and again, I would say don't strive for perfection. Aim to do your best. It's okay if you don't get every single question correct, but I'm hoping you now have some strategies to do your best on most of them. Okay, so we're at time now. So that's basically the end of our content. I'm just going to quickly go over some of our free study materials, and then we'll log off. So we'll probably be another 5 minutes or so if you have that length of time to stay. First and foremost, there was a question earlier about the cost of the CELPIP test. So the general test for PR status, etc., is 280 Canadian dollars plus tax, which is expensive. So if you're looking for a free CELPIP test, I've got 2 opportunities for you. The first is if you've taken already an IELTS general test since February 1st of this year, or you will take one before November 1st, you're actually eligible to apply to be part of a CELPIP research study. There is an application form on our website, and if you are accepted into the study, they'll give you a free CELPIP test, and you can use those scores to actually apply for your immigration journeys and so on. Also, if you are a newcomer to Canada, and this means that you've lived in Canada for 5 years or less, Prometric, the company that delivers the CELPIP test, they have a partnership with the National Bank of Canada. So if you open a bank account with them, the bank is actually going to give you a $280 cashback feature, which will cover the cost of the test, just less the taxes. So those are 2 money-saving options if you haven't already booked a test, but we're hoping to do so. Sorry, Sarush, did you wanted to chime in?
Just want to talk like for 2 minutes after you're done.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. I'm just going to be a minute or two for sure. Yeah. I wanted to mention to you that our CELPIP test has been accepted for student direct stream finally by the IRCC, which is exciting. So that just means it's going to save you a lot of time as you're getting your paperwork in order, is basically what it boils down to. We are doing 3 more webinar series that will cover your reading, your writing, and your speaking. And we'll do that with Sarush and ILIA Academy. They're coming up every 2 weeks' time. So 2 weeks from today and so on. And further to that, we're looking at doing some other helpful sessions on writing and speaking. So you're very welcome to register for those. I also deliver a lot of these webinars through my own channels with Prometric. So you're most welcome to check out our schedule there. And and Sarush has put in the links in our chat box, which is super helpful. These are all free, so feel free to jump in. We have a YouTube channel with lots of really helpful content, and we're coming back live with more content in September. So check us out there at CELPIP Official. We have podcasts that you can listen to. They're on our website. We've got some speaking and writing test taker responses that you can look at, understand the score on the test, and read what they did well and where they need to improve. This is right at our website at celpip.ca. We do have 2 free practice tests that I would love for you to try before you do the real thing. So watch the webinars first so you know what to do, and then try it all by yourself. See how it goes. And if there was something that was really hard, that's where you're going to continue to study. Starting yesterday, by the way, up until tomorrow, That would be 4:30 p.m. Pacific time. There is a 50% off sale from everything in our bookstore. So that includes buying additional practice tests. That includes these 2 online study programs. And the Accelerate program, we're going to give you a promo code for the listening and speaking one anyway. So you'll get that one for free. But if you wanted to purchase the other ones, they're half off. We've got ebooks. So there are study guides and CELPIP error books. We have a textbook series as well, and even a vocabulary skills workbook. It's a print book. So when we email you, we'll give you instructions with the websites, etc. But if you did want to redeem that free product, you'll need to go to the CELPIP bookstore. This is a screenshot of what it looks like. You'll find the item. It's actually the listening and speaking program. And when you put that little promotional code in the bottom box there where it says discount, it'll make that product free for you to download. Because the sale's on till tomorrow, any promotional code you put in there isn't going to work right now. But if you try the promo code the moment the sale ends, it should give you the free product. So you'll just have to wait an extra day or so to redeem it. The promotional code is going to expire sooner than later though. So if you wanted the free product, please take advantage and download it to your computer before you lose access to it. Once downloaded, you'll have that product for 6 months. So I think that's a really helpful way to help you study with listening and speaking anyway. And again, here's a nice, if you wanted to take a screenshot, you could. It just gives you our contact info and reminds you of our social media channels. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Sorry, I've kept you a few minutes extra, but I did want to give Sarush some time to close up today before we log out. So Sarush, I'll pass the mic back to you.
All right, thank you so much, Brandy. It was great. I think it was a great presentation. I'm pretty sure that like everybody learned a lot of things today, including myself. And I would like to thank everybody for joining us today. For those of you who joined us late today, because at the very beginning of this webinar, I spoke for a few minutes describing everything about whatever we do at our school. So once again, I'm going to introduce myself. My name is Sarush Hazani. I'm the founder and owner of ILIA English Academy. So we are a Vancouver-based online language school for CELPIP, IELTS, ESL, French, and Spanish with 28 years of professional background in this field. Currently we are delivering courses to students from all around the world. People from many different countries get connected to our classes. And our teachers are located in Vancouver, Calgary, Toronto, Montreal, and Costa Rica, because we also have Spanish classes that I mentioned. Our Spanish teacher is Costa Rican. And we are a proud member of, we are proud to be CELPIP Network official member in Canada and approved center for training classes and mock tests. About the courses that we have in our school, we do general English classes, Power English, IELTS, CELPIP, bi-weekly mock tests of IELTS. We do mock tests of CELPIP, CALE preparation, free discussion, job interview preparation classes, essay writing, English grammar clinic. That's a very, very interesting course, and French and Spanish. I shared the social media links with you in the chat box a few minutes ago, so you can follow us there. And we have 3 other webinars. So every 2 weeks, we're going to be presenting, one skill of CELPIP. Today, we covered everything about listening. The next webinar, I think I also put the links in the chat box, is going to be on September 7th on reading, September 22nd writing, October 5th speaking, 2 to 4 Vancouver time. And also the attendees today will receive 3 study materials from Prometric and 1 free CELPIP class from ILIA English Academy. So if you're interested in joining our classes and also use that free class, so you can DM us on Instagram, and I'm gonna put the links again here. And we'll see you next time for the reading webinar. So just give me a few seconds. I'm gonna just post everything again here. So you can click on the links and you can follow it because somebody had written here, we cannot copy and paste. I don't know, like if wonder what the problem is.
Yeah,
but,
I don't know what it is either, actually, because it looked
yeah.
like it was applicable to me, but.
Yeah, so we can once again, so this is our Instagram, then it's our Telegram group, which is on CELPIP. The name is CELPIP Up. You can also follow us there, our website, and the link to our Google. So do you have any questions for us? Thank you so much, Brandy and Azani. Azani is my last name. It's okay, but my first name is Surush. Call me Surush.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Surush and Brandy, for arranging this session. So many. Oh, perfect. Wow, lots of energy.
Yeah. And I
Lots
have to say, before we all log off too, I have to say I always appreciate the energy and participation of the group. It's not easy sitting in front of a computer screen for 2 hours. Online learning is hard for some of us.
Yeah.
Sitting for 2 hours and focusing. It's the middle of the day in Vancouver and it's late at night in other parts of the world. So the fact that you've taken time out of your busy days to join in says a lot for your dedication. So I really highly appreciate the participation from you. And it's better than me talking at you for 2 hours. Imagine if you didn't participate. That would be tough. So I do appreciate the energy.
Okay, somebody has asked for the 2 people have asked for the Telegram group. Here is the link again. Oh, good night, everyone. Where are you?
Exactly. It's probably
Morale, right? So where are you? I'm interested to know. Yeah, Brandy, thanks very much. I think that's just the end of our presentation today. So, Halifax, Nova Scotia. So, Brandy, any words?
No, one person asked for the promo code. Prometric will email you one email that will give you again the promotional code and instructions on how to download that free product. So within the next, we always say 24 hours just to give time. So do check your email inbox with the.
And don't forget to tell your friends about our webinars, especially the ones to come. Today, so many people have participated, and we are very proud of it. And I'm pretty sure, like in our next webinars, I mean, we're going to have so many people joining us.
Yeah.
So, Brandy, thank you.
Thank you so much, and it's excellent to see you again, Surush. I look forward to the next one in 2 weeks' time.
Yeah, of course. All right, thanks everyone for joining us, and until next time.
Yes, until next time.
Bye.
See you then. Bye.